Hi everybody, I'm Kathy Haugen and I'm a registered dietitian from TriHealth, and I think this is my third or fourth presentation here, so it's great to be back. And I do all kinds of different things for TriHealth. I do cooking demos at companies and nutrition consults for our various corporate clients, and then also these presentations too. And if you've seen me before, welcome back. And if you haven't seen me, I hope you enjoy our presentation. It's practical ideas and a whole new research about this whole anti-inflammatory nutrition topic, which I just love to talk about. So I always like to start out by telling you that, or kind of explaining, most of you know what inflammation is. Inflammation can be chronic conditions like diabetes, heart disease, arthritis. It can be when we're sick. It can be when we're stressed. And what happens with inflammation is that these things called free radicals start acting wacky. So let's just kind of backtrack just a little bit. We all have cells that make all the parts of our bodies, all of our tissues and organs and all that kind of thing. And the cells are made up of molecules and atoms. And within the atoms, if you remember fourth grade science class, we learned about protons, neutrons, and electrons. Those are the little tiny things that are kind of inside the atom doing their thing. But the part that is part of the inflammatory condition are the crazy little electrons. And the electrons are the guys that are just moving all the time inside the atom. And that's fine as long as they stay contained in the atom. But if that atom breaks down because of some kind of inflammation, what happens is these crazy electrons start going to surrounding atoms and cells and cause like a domino effect for inflammation. And those crazy electrons are called free radicals. Have you ever heard that term before? Free radicals? So they're the culprit. They're the things that we're trying to contain or prevent from infecting or inflaming all the surrounding tissue. So I will often use anti-inflammatory and antioxidant interchangeably, and they are kind of different. But so oxidation is when our cells break down, and that's when those crazy free radicals take off. So if we eat foods that are anti-inflammatory or antioxidants, that's going to help capture these free radicals so that it doesn't completely do the domino effect and cause inflammation throughout the other organs and that kind of thing too. So that's what we're talking about. It's my best example is if you take this beautiful gala apple and you cut it up in eighths and you're sitting it on your plate, and all of a sudden you get this phone call from your cousin who you haven't heard from in like 2 years. So you pick up the phone, you're so happy to talk to your cousin, you're going back and forth, recollecting, catching up, finding out how things are going, etc. And before you know it, you've just used up 2 hours of talking time, just really enjoying each other's conversation. So you hang up and you say, we got to do this more often. And when you do that, you look at your apple, and what's happened to the apple? It's turned brown. It's oxidized. The oxygen in the atmosphere has reacted with the enzymes and with the sugars and have broken it down and almost made it rusty, almost inflamed the apple. Not that that brown stuff is poisonous or, would make you sick. It just isn't very appetizing. So you could go ahead and eat that, which a lot of us don't. We'd rather cut it off. But what kept that apple or the flesh of the apple from turning brown? What kept it from turning brown? The skin did, right? It protected it. So if you can kind of keep that in mind, that it's the skin of the apple is what these antioxidants and anti-inflammatory foods do, is they protect our cells so that those crazy free radicals and electrons don't go shooting all in different directions, causing more inflammation. Okay? So with that said, we'll kind of get into it. So eating, it's just not quite centered. Eating well balanced diet is important for everyone. We know that, especially for those of us that suffer from arthritis or really any inflammatory condition. And while we don't recommend a specific anti-inflammatory diet per se, and as a dietitian, I hate the word diet because the word die is in that word. And so I much rather call it a food plan because diet has such a bad connotation. So we're going to say anti-inflammatory food plan, but choosing healthy foods can really offer the best benefits. So what are those? Uh-oh. We are not advancing. Anybody techie? Because I'm not.
Nobody comes with you.
Let's see here. Okay, I'll just do it by hand. So, eating a healthy meal plan, the benefits would be try to keep your weight to a healthy weight for you, and eating an anti-inflammatory meal plan can help you build very strong cartilage. You know what cartilage is, right? It's what your nose is, your ears, and it's kind of like throughout our body. It's the cartilage that's between our joints. It's those little discs that are between our spinal, our vertebrae, our backbone. And so cartilage is throughout our body. So eating an anti-inflammatory meal plan can also help with that too. Boy, this is nuts. Let's see here. This isn't my computer. It's a more updated one, so that's the problem. We just have ancient equipment.
That little arrow to the side, will that advance you? Right there?
This guy?
Yeah, try that.
Ah, thank you.
No, not too far.
Okay, oh, I'm touching.
There's an arrow on the top toolbar that's like a down arrow.
Yeah. There you go, yeah.
I think at the bottom of the screen.
At the bottom of the screen?
No, the top.
You're there.
To the, that one.
This guy?
To the left.
Towards the door.
You guys are so
That
cute.
way.
Oh, that left.
That way.
Yes.
Okay, my right.
Are you on
You're
PowerPoint?
right.
Yeah, it's a PowerPoint.
I don't know if you're in the full view yet. You're not.
Okay, this is a different program than what I'm used to. So if anybody wants to come up and help me, I'm very humble. I will, because I was trying to do from the beginning, because that's what I'm used to. You do it from the beginning, and
There you go, right there.
right there,
No, that's a sticky note.
that's a sticky note.
The arrow next to the 2, it says down.
The arrow next to the 2.
Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. You're at 27.
There you
Yeah.
go.
That's you.
Thank
Try
you.
that.
You guys are great. So just click on that.
Try it.
That should work. Yeah.
But see that it's still not centered. Oh, because I'm always used to going to from the beginning.
Scroll down. You scroll.
Isn't that going to annoy the heck out of you?
No. Little film strips.
It
Can
doesn't
you
look like it's
can
in
you help me
PowerPoint.
get from the beginning?
It's not your full view. I don't know how to tell you to get
I
it.
think if you go up to the very top,
Uh-huh.
I can try to help you.
Would you?
you see at the very top where it says file, you should be able to enter.
We need a 5-year-old.
Yeah, there's the file.
All the way up the top, yeah.
And I was trying to
Open
do from the
presentation.
beginning.
Already snap, okay, going over, go to
View?
view.
Well, let's go to full screen
There you go.
first of all.
Here you go.
Got it.
Boom.
There you go.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, you
then
should
let's
be able
see.
to click.
Yeah, see, now you can use these arrows back and
So I'll
forth.
go back and forth.
There you go.
There we go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, my tech assistant. All right, so let's go. I feel like so discombobulated. Okay, so the benefits of eating an anti-inflammatory meal plan include these things: helping you keep your weight down, building strong cartilage, and reducing inflammation. So these are the tips. Cut extra calories. You belong to this club. You're here trying to be as physically active and as healthy and as fit as you can. So I'm preaching to the choir with this one. But weight is one of the biggest factors in preventing and treating arthritis, which is one of the biggest inflammatory conditions that we have. So one study showed that obese, I hate the word obese, it just sounds so degrading, but in science and in medical terminology, obese means when your body weight is 30% or more in fat. So if you've ever had your body fat percentage done, sometimes we use those the little monitor, and that just, obese just means more than 30% of your weight is in fat. But what is so encouraging is one study found that obese women who lost just 11 pounds cut their risk of osteoarthritis in half. And it makes sense because then you don't have so much pressure on all of your joints causing that wear and tear. So I know that there's just all kinds of interesting and crazy meal plans out there for weight loss, but I tend to be a purist and pretty boring when it comes to this, because the best thing to me is take smaller portions, watch the sugary stuff, especially the sugary drinks, because they just kind of pour the calories on you. There was one study done that if a person drank regular soda and they cut 1 can a day out of their intake daily, they lost 10 pounds without doing anything else. So it's darn sugary sodas and sugary drinks that can pour it on. And then try to focus more on plant-based foods too. And you already know about the fruits and veggies, but this is where I get really excited, because this is where the anti-inflammatory power is the most prominent. It's those fruits and vegetables that are just packed with antioxidants or anti-inflammatory power. And the more dark and vivid in color, the more packed they are. And so berries, 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 berries. I know here it just mentions about strawberries, but all berries are just wonderful. And so I always tell my clients that if there are 2 things, and we'll get to the leafy greens in a second, but if there are 2 things that you really want to strive for to really make an impact on how you feel in terms of inflammation, try to get a half a cup to a cup of berries every day. And I know right now it's berry season, which is good, but a lot of times it's not, and they're expensive. But I'm here to tell you, you're worth it. You are worth it. You can get those, you can get them frozen, you can put them in a smoothie, you can put them in your oatmeal, it doesn't matter. But if you can eat a half a cup to a cup of berries every day, and if you can eat a cup of leafy greens every day, we'll get to that in a minute, but those are the 2 that if I could do a prescription, those are the 2 things that I try to encourage everybody to do. So let's talk a little bit about it. As a bonus, we know that many are loaded with the antioxidants, which are substances that can protect your cells from damage. Some antioxidants found in apples, onions, shallots, and strawberries can also help joint inflammation. And this is, I don't know if you've ever heard this study before, but those of us that suffer from osteoarthritis, my mother's very arthritic, I'm arthritic, and my 3 sisters are too. In fact, I had a hip replacement done, and I'm a hiker and a biker, so it about killed me when I had to have the hip done. But now I'm bionic and can continue doing my activity. But for those of us that do suffer from osteoarthritis, there was a really interesting study done that showed that those who drank tart cherry juice, not the dark cherry juice, but tart. And if you have to add a little sweetener to it, that's okay. A little sugar, sugar, inflammation. But the tart cherry juice is going to compensate for the inflammation from the sugar. But if you just drank a little bit twice a day, that has been shown to really, really be promising. So stay tuned to that research, because it's really, really, really exciting. The fruit is also called sour cherries or dwarf cherries, several varieties, but they're not sweet cherries, not the ones that you buy at the grocery store. Those are still good, and those are still anti-inflammatory. They're just not the specific chemical, or not chemical, but nutrient that can really help with the osteoporosis. So if you just drank 8 ounces of tart cherry juice, or put 2 tablespoons, I buy mine in concentrate, and I buy it online because it's a lot cheaper. But I always tell people, before you try doing something like this, why don't you buy some at Kroger or Trader Joe's or somewhere first, a concentrate, and see if you can handle it, and try it for 3 weeks and see if it makes a difference. And then if it does, then you can order it online. There's all kinds of great online services that it's a pump, and you just pump it, and that's the amount you need. You dilute it with water, and it's not bad. You get used to it after a while. So read the label to make sure that it's tart cherry juice. You can buy it at Kroger, concentrate, and make sure you get pure, not just a juice blend. And although there are many benefits, there are also some potential side effects, and the side effects are thought to be less dangerous than over-the-counter anti-inflammatory drugs. It's always a good idea to consult your doctor, you know that. A few side effects that people have experienced are diarrhea and abdominal pain. If it's sweetened with sorbitol. Have you ever heard of like mannitol, sorbitol? Anything with an OL is called a sugar alcohol. It's not like an alcohol that you drink, you know, in a mixed drink, but it's a type of a non-nutritive sweetener. And some of us, if we do those non-nutritive sugar alcohols, somehow our bacteria in our GI tract just goes hog wild on it. It can cause diarrhea and gas. And that's why I really want you to try it in different kinds before you find one, before you buy a boatload of it, to make sure you tolerate it. Yeah.
Do you know from a study if it's only cherry juice? Because I bought before like cranberry juice that's tart cranberry juice with no sugar. It's also like really tart. So is it?
So far it's tart cherry.
Or does it include other ones like
It's-
cranberry or pomegranate juice?
You know, those are great. Those are the cranberry, the pomegranate juices are all wonderful, and they're all anti-inflammatory, but there's just something specific to tart cherry.
Okay,
But the other juices are great, because that's still going to give you,
Cherry's the best.
right, at this point. But stay tuned, because the studies are still going on, okay? And, you know, you have to watch the calories, but to me, these are calories that are high-quality calories that are going to really help you with inflammation. And this is specifically toward osteoarthritis. You know, otherwise, the cranberry juice, pomegranate juice, all those really deep colored juices are just wonderful in terms of anti-inflammatory power. But you do need to watch the calories and make sure that you get the ones that aren't quite as sweet.
So are you saying that it is a inflammatory reducer, or are you just saying it's not, it's anti-inflammatory? Does it actually
It's
reduce it?
the study that was done says it's an inflammatory reducer.
Huh.
But stay tuned, because you know they need to do more of a longitudinal study. They just did kind of a cross-sectional study. And so if you came to my presentation before talking about the MIND meal plan, the Mediterranean DASH meal plan, there were all these different facts that I was sharing with you, but I said stay tuned, because we're coming up with a bunch of different studies now, because Tufts University is like the mecca of nutrition research. So stay tuned. And you can oftentimes find really good research. You probably have your most favorite sites, but the two that I trust are WebMD and Mayo Clinic. And so you can always just, you know, Google that within the Mayo Clinic website or the WebMD, and then just see what the latest is. But to me, it's just really exciting when you hear that food can really have this much power. And then omega-3 fatty acids. I'm going to go ahead and talk about omega-3 and omega-6s real quick, and we'll talk about omega-6s in a minute. But when I studied to be a dietitian, I had to take bioorganic chemistry. And when you take bioorganic chemistry, you learn about these different molecules that are carbon atoms connected to oxygen, connected to hydrogen atoms, and there's all these different configurations. So depending on the configuration, they will like label it. And that's what omega-3 and omega-6 means. It's just the position of the different parts of the molecule. So you don't need to know that. You just need to know that our human body needs omega-6s and omega-3s, but we need them to be in balance. Omega-6 fatty acids are widespread in the food supply. You don't really have to work hard at getting those in, because they're very widespread, especially in prepared foods. So that's why we're always emphasizing the omega-3s, because you want to make sure you get enough omega-3s so that it's balanced. So omega-3 fatty acids can help relieve joint pain and decrease morning stiffness by reducing inflammation. And if you can do the fatty fish, I know some people just can't handle it, and I respect that. But if you can do the salmon, the tuna, the sardines, the mackerel, the herring, and the trout, that's where you're going to get those heavy-duty omega-3s. People always ask me about fish oil tablets. Well, nutrition can be so frustrating because the pendulum goes like this. So 1 minute fish oil tablets are great. The next minute, no, they don't do anything. The next minute, they're great. The next minute, they don't do anything. So it depends on the studies. My ophthalmologist swears by fish oil tablets for the omega-3 fatty acids, but then my husband's primary care says, no, it's a waste. Don't invest in those. So it's so frustrating because it's like, yikes, is it good or is it bad? The only kind of caution I have about taking fish oil capsules is if you're on a blood thinner. If you're on a blood thinner, you should not be taking those because they thin the blood. And so if you're taking Eliquis or my mom's, God bless her, she's on warfarin because that does the best for her atrial fib. We have to go once a month and get her INR checked. But she'd like to be on the other ones, but the cardiologist says we're not going to rock the boat. So she would not be a candidate to take fish oil tablets. But if you get it in the fish, by eating the fish, you're going to get a lot better amount. You're going to get a more potent amount. And secondly, you're going to get the benefit of the fish too, which is a good protein. So that's why we'd rather you do that, but you can also get it in walnuts, tofu, soybean products, flaxseed oil, and canola oil are all good sources too. If you choose to use flaxseed, make sure you use ground flaxseed. If you just use the whole little flax seeds that look like little insects, your digestive system is not going to be able to break down that cell wall, and you won't get that healthy oil that's inside that little seed. So you want to make sure you get the flaxseed meal. Some people just buy the seeds and they grind it up in their little coffee grinder, but you can get Fred's Red Mill flaxseed meal. And so how do you eat it? Put it in your oatmeal, put it in your smoothies. My husband and I just sprinkle it on our salads. It kind of gives it like a little nutty flavor. So that's another really good way to get the omega-3s in. So you understand that we need omega-6s and omega-3s, but we tend to be off kilter because we tend, just in our American meal plan, we tend to get a lot of 6s anyway, and we want to bring that omega-3 intake up so that they're balanced. Okay? So those are the main sources of that. And then olive oil, we've talked about this before in other talks. There's a wonderful chemical in olive oil, or compound is a better way of saying it, called oleocanthal, and it is really anti-inflammatory and can prevent inflammation. Most of you probably already know this, but in case you don't, there's usually extra virgin, and virgin olive oil. And the way you can tell the difference is extra virgin, it's got that real strong olive flavor, and it's the first pressing of the olives. When they press it a second time, that's the extra virgin, and then the third pressing is the virgin olive oil. So when I used to be able to partner with chefs and do cooking demos, they told me that they prefer the extra virgin olive oil because they think extra virgin is way too strong of a flavor. And so most of them prefer either extra virgin or an extra virgin olive oil canola oil blend, and that kind of tones it down a little bit. For those of us that use olive oil for actual cooking versus salad dressing or a marinade, you probably know this, that it has a very low smoking point. So if you're turning it up to really high heat, you start to see it smoke. And when that happens, what happens is that it's starting to break down, and then you don't get the benefit of the oleocanthal. So that's why you never want to do super high heat when you're doing using olive oil for cooking. That's why it makes a great marinade, salad dressing, that kind of thing. But if you do a lower heat, then that's going to be just fine. And that's when canola oil is a really good idea. And just like all oils, sometimes people will they'll just forget that fat is good. Fat gives us satiety. It gives us staying power. It helps our blood sugar stay a little bit more level. But we're all trying to, moderate our fat intake, which is just wonderful. But we got to remember that 1 teaspoon of any kind of fat is about 45 calories. So you don't want to use a lot. One time I had a cardiac patient that told me, "Oh, Kathy, I heard olive oil is so good for my heart, so I put 2 tablespoons a day in my tomato juice, stir it and drink it." It's like, Oh my gosh, first of all, that's 270 calories of oil in your tomato juice that you don't need. Second of all, how do you get that down? Don't do that. So just striping your pan with it, using it in salad dressings, that kind of thing is a great way to use the olive oil. Okay? Any questions at all about that? And the flavored olive oils are fine too. Get enough vitamin C. Vitamin C is so important in building our collagen and our connective tissue. So great sources of C are all these things, and really anything that's bright and deep in color. I know cabbage, it's mainly the outer leaves that would have the vitamin C and most of the antioxidant power. So recommended is men 95 milligrams a day, women 75. And then folic acid. Folic acid to me, folate, folic acid, same thing. It is such an amazing vitamin to me because it was probably 35, 40 years ago that the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology found that if a woman was wanting to start her family and wanting to conceive, if she had adequate folic acid, she and took that in her prenatal time and even before she was trying to conceive to have a child, she could actually lower the percentage of her baby having a neural tube defect or some kind of a neurological challenge, basically spina bifida and things like that. So folic acid or folate is just such an important vitamin. And so we found it can be found in food, obtained by supplementation. It helps us manufacture our red blood cells. For those people that have rheumatoid arthritis who take methotrexate, supplementing with folic acid may help avoid some of the side effects, which is really nice. But it's very widespread in different foods, in the whole grain cereals, the leafy veggies, and you can read the rest. Organ meat, although a lot of us are trying not to eat the organ meats because of the cholesterol issue. And then a lot of my clients will say, well, Kathy, I love liver, but I don't eat liver anymore because I realize that it's the detoxification organ in that animal, and I'm trying to cut back on that. Or, we're trying to cut back on our meat consumption overall too. But there's so many other good choices or good sources of folic acid. And then vitamin D. I always like to share with you about vitamin D because it's like the big hip vitamin now. In human nutrition, we need both water-soluble vitamins and fat-soluble vitamins. The fat-soluble vitamins are D, E, K, and A. So if you can just remember the word DECA, D-E-K-A, that will help you remember what the fat-soluble vitamins are. And why am I telling you this? Because fat-soluble vitamins can actually be toxic if you get too much of them. And we're having kind of an issue with vitamin D. I'll talk to you about that in a second. All the rest of the vitamins, folate, folic acid, B12, vitamin C, B1, B2, riboflavin, niacin, all those are water-soluble vitamins. So that means that your body will use what it needs and then excrete what it doesn't. So if you take a super vitamin pill or a bunch of different ones, like a vitamin cocktail altogether, a bunch of pills, then you're going to excrete the water-soluble vitamins that you don't need. But there's a possibility with the fat-soluble vitamins that they can appear to cause a toxicity. And that's one thing about vitamin D. Most of us as adults probably have more of a problem getting enough vitamin D than getting too much, but not necessarily. So when you get your annual physical and you get your blood work done, your doctor is going to measure your vitamin D. And your physician then will tell you if you need to do a mega supplement, which is a lot, or just a maintenance supplement, or if you're not taking vitamin D and you're doing fine because you get it in other sources, that's great. But we don't want to take too much because it can become toxic. So let's say, my 92-year-old mom went in, got her blood work done, found that her D was low because she never gets outside. If you remember in 4th grade, you learned that vitamin D is the sunshine vitamin. It really is. And it lies under the epidermis, the outer layer of our skin. There's a fat layer, and that's where inactive vitamin D lays. And so what happens is when the UV rays from the sun penetrate our skin, they make inactive D into active D, which is great, but a lot of us are trying to stay out of the sun now because of skin cancer. And I get it. And so, when you slather all that sunscreen on, you are filtering, but you are getting some of that ultraviolet in a good way. It's just being filtered. So, and then we live in Cincinnati, where we have gray days. What, 90%? Not really, you know what I mean? But we have gray days, especially in the winter. It's just so horrible. So vitamin D deficiency is very common, but what I find that my clients will do is they will say, oh, Kathy, I just think I'm low, so I'm going to get like this mega dose and start chugging it. And it's like, no, don't do that. Only take a mega dose if your doctor recommends it. And generally what they'll have you do is come back in 3 months. They'll check your levels again, and 9 times out of 10, your level got back to normal, and then you can just be on a maintenance dose. So never just start chugging a DE, A, or K vitamin, because they can become toxic. So you can see what the requirements are. We used to always measure them in IUs, international units, but now we measure them in micrograms. So for adults that are 69 or younger, 15 micrograms a day. Adults that are 70 plus, 20 micrograms a day. And then getting enough calcium too is important. And then saturated fats, I just find that when I come and talk to a group like you already watch saturated fats. When we talk about polyunsaturated fats, monounsaturated fats, and saturated fats, those are the 3 main types of fats and cholesterol, okay? Again, going back to my bioorganic chemistry training, what with the poly and the mono and the saturated, what that means, it has to do with how many double carbon bonds there are. You don't need to know that. You just need to know that polyunsaturated fats are good, monounsaturated fats are better, and saturated fats are what we want to try to avoid. 35, 40 years ago, we thought polyunsaturated fats were just the best. We thought corn oil, sunflower, soft flour, soybean, all those oils were the best. They had the most little double bonds in their carbon chain, and they were the best. And we thought monounsaturated fats, which are peanut oil and olive oil, were kind of like, whatever. They're not healthy, they're not unhealthy. And then we knew that the saturated fats were the bad guys that could boost up your cholesterol. So then we started making trans fats. The food industry decided that we didn't have enough convenience foods, we didn't have enough snack foods, we didn't have enough sweets, and so they didn't have enough lard to make all these cookies and crackers. So what they did is they took the polyunsaturated fats, which were the sunflower, soft flour, soybean, corn oil, all those, and they decided to take them from the liquid form and turn them into a solid so they could mimic what lard would do. And they said, well, we started with a good oil to begin with. All we're doing is pump it full of hydrogenation to make it solid. But then we found out, man, did we mess up. Because it turned out that those fats that were transposed from a liquid to a solid were actually worse for our body than lard was. And so that's why, trans fats are out of the picture now. And now we've since found that monounsaturated fats are really the healthiest. Polys are underneath, saturated fats are the least desirable. You all know about HDL and LDL, right? You have your total cholesterol number, you have your HDL, which is high density lipoprotein, and the way you can remember it's the good one, H stands for healthy, hyper, happy. LDL is lousy, lazy, low life. That's how you get them straight, because everybody gets them mixed up, okay? Healthy, happy, hyper, lousy, lazy, low life. So what polyunsaturated fats did was they helped lower that LDL, but then we found out they kind of lowered the HDL too. And your HDL is what you're trying so hard to keep high by exercising. So we went, well, polyunsaturated fats are good, but why are they lowering our HDL? And then we found out that monounsaturated fats basically increase our HDL and lower our LDL. So they're kind of the desirable ones. And saturated fats, believe it or not, they can maintain HDL, which is really weird, but they also crank up the lousy, lazy, low life. But trans fats wipe out everything. So that's why you want to just have the combination. So saturated fats are fats that are animal-based, and they are solid at room temperature, and they're the ones that trans fats mimicked, and they're the ones that do the biggest number on our cholesterol levels and also our inflammation. So what happens is that foods such as animal products like bacon, steak, butter, and cream have these things called prostaglandins that are definitely inflammatory provoking. And so that's why we want to try to watch those. I love bacon. I'm a dietitian that loves bacon, but I only eat it when I'm camping or at my daughter's. And now my 2 granddaughters love bacon. It's like, oh my gosh, they got the bacon gene. That's terrible. But, I just don't eat it often. And so it's just because of these, and I probably like it because it's so forbidden, but it's a given fact that the saturated fats really do lead toward inflammation.
How about turkey bacon?
It's fine. It's still smoked. It's still got the nitrates, and that's a whole different ball game. But it's a lot leaner, so it's fine. I can just tell the difference. I am not a discriminate taster, but I can tell turkey bacon. But it's a good choice.
How about ice cream?
So then the omega-3s and omega-6s, we talked about the balance. And so studies show that the typical Western meal plan has omega-6s more. And so they're in the corn, soybean, sunflower, sesame, and wheat germ oils, which are great. But the problem is that we were having too many of them, and we're throwing our equilibrium out of whack. So if you can just moderate your intake of convenience and processed foods and then focus more on omega-3s, then you're going to be just great. And then the whole grains, oh my gosh, I find that people are just really understanding this now more than ever, because fiber and plus the anti-inflammatory value of whole grains is just so beneficial. When you take any kind of a kernel of grain and you do a cross section, you got the outer part, that's called the bran. You got the starchy stuff in the middle, that's called the endosperm, and that's what actually feeds the seed for it to sprout and grow. And then you got the little tiny oil thing called the germ. And so back when great-great-grandma went to the mill and actually got the flour or got her, wheat kernels all ground up, she got all the bran, she got the endosperm, and she got the germ all together. But the problem was that if she didn't make all the bread and use it up within 2-3 weeks, it would go rancid on her because that wheat germ has oil in it. So when we decided as a nation that we need to have all these baked goods and all these products, we wanted longer shelf life. So what they ended up doing is they threw out the germ because of that little bit of oil, and then they said, well, the bran kind of makes it look brown, that's gross, we like it all white and bleached and everything, so we're going to just go ahead and feed the germ and the bran to the pigs, and we're just going to use the endosperm. Well, what happened was we had very healthy pigs and very healthy people. Okay, so now they've realized that they put the whole kit and caboodle in. And remember the trend of eating wheat germ and you had to keep it in the refrigerator because otherwise it would get rancid. And wheat germ's got that good oil in it, and it's fine. If you like to use it, that's great. And it's kind of a dense source of good healthy oils. So that's how you tell, or that's what a whole grain is. A whole grain has every part of that kernel. The outer part, the bran, the endosperm, and the germ. And when you're looking at your different products and trying to buy, a good pasta, brown rice versus white rice, maybe a different kind of grain like quinoa, maybe a whole wheat bread, how do you tell what's the healthiest? Zero in on your label and try to find the one that has the highest amount of fiber. They did the investigation for you, and the information's right there. But you have to like it. Because if you don't like it, I've had so many of my clients that just do not like brown pasta. They just don't like the look of it. But now there's so many high fiber pastas that aren't brown, which is really good. And then high cooking temperatures, you all know about this. The AGEs, the advanced glycation end products, and that's when the fat of our different protein products change form and turn into that crunchy, blackened stuff that some of us just love to eat. And so AGEs are associated with arthritis, heart disease, and diabetes. They're found naturally in our body, but this is like a larger amount of AGEs. And for the men in the audience, there's been a lot of correlation between a high intake of AGEs, a lot of grilled, charred food, and prostate cancer. So, men have the prostate cancer concern, we women have the breast cancer concern, and we all have all the other cancer concerns too. So AGEs have been a large intake of blackened charred food has been associated with that. And then, how many of you have already known about all these herbs and spices, how they're magically anti-inflammatory? They're just wonderful. It's just, and we're just finding out more and more research about this. Turmeric is just wonderful, and it's found to reduce inflammation. Ginger, a lot of times people have used ginger to help their upset stomach settle down. One time I went on a cruise and they were handing out ginger tablets when the seas were getting rough, and it really did help. It was just simply amazing. Cinnamon, just be really, really liberal with cinnamon. Put it in your cereal, put it in your coffee. Cinnamon is a great one. Garlic. Some people can't tolerate garlic because of the type of starch it is, and sometimes the older we get, we can't tolerate it as well because our stomachs and our enzymes can't break down the certain starches in garlic. So in that case, go ahead and avoid it because we don't want you doubled over in pain. But I always like to tell people that because some of us think the older that we get, we just can't do the onions and the garlic as much, and it's like, what's wrong with me? Well, your enzymes have just changed in your digestive tract, and they just can't break down the certain starches in those bulb type vegetables. And so it's not in your mind, you're not nuts. It's just that what happens then, the bacteria just starts eating on all those different starches in those bulb type vegetables, causes horrible gas, and you can't tolerate it. But sometimes when people take that supplement called Beano, we always think it's only for beans. But sometimes if you take a Beano before you eat a high garlic or a high onion meal, and that will oftentimes help alleviate that too, help break down that starch.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You said about the vitamin E capsules. What about turmeric capsules? Do they work as well as putting turmeric?
The pendulum's like this again on those. Yeah, I wish I had a definitive answer for you, and I'm really glad you asked that. Because there's garlic capsules too, there's cinnamon tablets, all that kind of thing. And I had read a recent study that showed that for some people, it can actually be counterproductive. So, what's my default answer? Ask your doctor. Well, a lot of times they don't keep up with it, because they can't. But that would be a really good Mayo Clinic or WebMD to ask about the turmeric because they keep up to snuff on those. Yeah.
Alcoholic beverage has least amount of sugar, I guess, or...
There's so many of them now that, you almost have to read the label. And the funny part is that the craft beers, they're not going to have a label. They don't want you to know there's 600 calories per serving, So, but...
I mean, wine, beer, or booze.
They might not have the sugar, but they're going to have the alcohol content. And the alcohol content is metabolized like fat in your bloodstream. And so it's just as caloric. If you take a 1 gram of carbohydrates, a gram is about the weight of a small paper clip, that's 4 calories a gram. 1 gram of protein is 4 calories a gram. 1 gram of fat is 9 calories a gram, and alcohol is 7 calories a gram. So, you still got the alcohol. I just don't drink, and I don't read alcohol labels, so I can't really tell you. But oftentimes the drier, the wine is, obviously. A lot of people are doing a lot of the, I used to call them spritzers, like the White Claw and stuff like that, and they're refreshing and they're different in some of the light beers. But just read the label if they actually do have a nutrition label on them. Cayenne pepper, if you can handle it, it's a huge anti-inflammatory. Black pepper and cloves. And the other thing I was going to tell you, oh my gosh, what's my contact here? Michael Downs. If you want this sent to you, this PowerPoint, it was stuff in there that you didn't get down, just contact him because he could probably forward it to your email. Okay, so because we're recording it, so it's open property. So just know you can do that. And then the beverage choices. Tea, green, black, and white teas are all rich in polyphenols. And polyphenols have been shown to have very strong anti-inflammatory effects. Green tea is generally viewed as the most because it's got the EGCG, I'm not going to try to pronounce the long name, which studies have shown helps preserve the cartilage in the bone. But all teas are good because of the polyphenols. Coffee also contains polyphenols, which help fight those crazy electrons, those free radicals in the body. The jury is out when it comes to the link between coffee and increased risk of rheumatoid arthritis or arthritis, osteoarthritis. Studies are still going on. And milk, some people say, well, just go dairy-free when they're diagnosed with arthritis, but there's no conclusive research that suggests that's the case. Drinking milk may help you prevent gout and fight the progression of osteoarthritis. But if you don't like milk, if you're drinking one of the milk substitutes like oat milk or rice milk or almond milk, that's fine. Just make sure it's fortified with vitamin D and calcium that they add to it. Juices, the different fruit juices, but just watch out for the sugar content. Orange juice, tomato juice, V8, pineapple, carrot juice, all high in C. Tart cherry juice, we talked about that. Smoothies are a great way to throw in all those dark colored fruits, and a lot of people throw in the dark colored vegetables too when they make their smoothie. Water, people are so good about water now. It is wonderful. If there's a magical elixir, it's water. Hydration is vital for flushing the toxins out, which can help fight inflammation. Keeps your joints lubricated because, you know, the two things keep your joints lubricated. Motion, all my PT friends say motion is lotion, so moving, and water. Two best things to keep you lubricated. And I consider anything that's decaf and calorie-free water. So I tend to be a little bit more liberal in my liquids. And so if you drink, you know, some kind of a beverage that's calorie-free, and because I drink a lot of decaf tea, I just love tea and a lot of decaf tea, and so I'm getting my polyphenols that way, and I'm also hydrating because it's decaf. Okay? And then the sugar intake. This is so interesting. The American Dietary Guidelines for Americans came out 4 years ago, and then they came out again, and recently. And they showed that the average American eats about 32 teaspoons of added sugar per day. 32 teaspoons, because it's sneaky. It's in stuff. It's really sneaky. And if you would look at a label, and if you would see the grams of added sugar listed, divide that number by 4, and that will convert it to teaspoons for you, just so you kind of have a handle as to what the teaspoons are. What the guidelines want us to do is try to limit our added sugar intake, added sugar, not the sugar that's inherent in all these deep colored fruits and vegetables, but added sugar to only 10% of our intake. So that would be 8 to 14 teaspoons depending on our caloric needs. The general rule of thumb is for females, try to limit it to 10 teaspoons of added sugar, which sounds like a lot, but it's sneaky. It's in all kinds of things. And for men, 14. And the only reason is because of the calorie difference of what our caloric requirements are. Processed sugar triggers the release of inflammatory messengers called cytokines. And cytokines are these just nasty little things that can trigger inflammation. So obviously the more that we limit our intake of added sugars, the better. But I've had, you know, people go, oh, I'm not going to eat fruit anymore. But fruit's got so much bang for your buck. You've got the fructose in there, which is natural fruit sugar, but you also have fiber, and you also have all these wonderful antioxidant properties. So don't not eat fruit. Fruit's wonderful. And then for some people, they consider taking probiotics. And probiotics, it's just the market is nuts with them right now. It's a general term for living microorganisms, often called friendly bacteria. Bacteria or yeast that are similar to organisms that are naturally found in the body. They have become a popular supplement. Why do people take them? They work by balancing the levels of microorganisms in the intestines. They drive down the numbers of harmful bacteria. They tend to boost the immune system. Although research is ongoing, there's good evidence that some probiotics may be helpful in treating IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and some types of diarrhea, colitis, etc. And if you suffer from all those, oh my gosh, probiotics can often be a godsend and just help you with that by boosting the good bacteria to help calm that condition down. There's many types. I don't want to get too technical on you, but they include lactobacilli and then bifidobacteria, and they have different effects. So while one may help treat diarrhea or vaginal infection, another may have no effect. So before you take one, of course, check with your health provider. And then the Mediterranean meal plan that is one of the best anti-inflammatory meal plans that you can follow. And so what are the highlights? Everything we just talked about. We know that rheumatoid arthritis is less severe in some Mediterranean countries like Greece and Italy. That's because they are pounding the fruits, the veggies, the olive oil, the fatty fish. And the plant-based diet is high in bioflavonoids that are plant compounds that have antiviral, anti-inflammatory, and anti-tumor activities. So the more that we can get those in, the better off we are. So in summary, try to eat fresh. Try to pick food items that are from the tree, from the ground and the vine. The more the food is in the original form, the better. So it's eating the apple versus the applesauce versus the apple juice. Reach for plant-based foods. Try to incorporate more of those. If you do eat from the animal, think lean and non-processed. Try to work on the healthy weight for you and be as active as you're able. Remember those omega-3s and try to reduce the omega-6s. Remember the C, the D, folic acid, and calcium. The whole grains. Try not to overcook to get those AGEs, your protein foods. Remember the healthy spices. Drink your healthy fluids. And make sure, ask your health provider if you're interested in probiotics. And then always have a treat every day. Your drink, your piece of chocolate, whatever it is. You got to have a treat every day because that keeps you on track. So do you have any questions for me about anything? Yeah.
I have two, actually.
Shoot.
Can you speak to caffeine and inflammation, and then are there certain foods to avoid? I know you talked a lot about except
Saturated
for
fats.
a couple, but I've heard like nightshades and things like that, and tomatoes.
Let me answer that question first, and then I'll address caffeine, okay? Nightshade vegetables are like a certain group, like tomatoes, eggplant, things like that. It is very individual.
Okay.
Just because you have rheumatoid arthritis or osteoarthritis doesn't mean you have to avoid nightshades. It's trial and error. I've had clients that will go ahead and eat those, and they feel better because of the antioxidant power. And I have others that say, wow, I wiped out eggplant and tomatoes, I feel so much better. So it's very, very individual. The things to avoid is kind of like we talked about, the high sugary stuff, the processed stuff, the saturated fats, and the blackened things. Okay, so that's kind of like
All of which I love.
of course. And in terms of caffeine, caffeine's been one of these pendulums too, going back and forth and back and forth. The current research that I know is that a little bit of caffeine's fine, but more than like 2 cups of a caffeinated beverage a day can almost spill into an inflammatory condition. And for some people, caffeine almost kind of gives them more of a boost, which is, you just, all these caffeinated energy drinks just scare me so much, especially with young kids that are chugging them and stuff now. Oh my gosh, you just hear these horrendous stories of these kids getting in mom and dad's, their energy drinks and just getting so sick. It's just really alarming. If you have already decaffeinated yourself, don't start. That's great. You do not have to have caffeine, but two servings of caffeine in the average cup of coffee are fine, and that would be a moderate healthy thing, and that would not, at this point, lead to inflammation. Good questions. Anybody else? Yeah.
During the pandemic, someone recommended that we take vitamin D. Do you still should we still be taking it if we're?
Well, and that's because we weren't going out. The main reason. And I really stand by that vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. We should not be taking it unless you're sure that your blood chemistry shows that you need to take it, because too much can cause a toxicity. Most of us could get away just fine with just taking the regular RDA, the recommended daily allowance, just the regular amount, and not have to worry about a toxicity. But some of us, when we get our blood levels checked, we find out, wow, I'm really low. And especially in the elderly, there's been an association with depression in the elderly that are so low in vitamin D that once they start doing a mega dose, which is a large dose, and get up to normal and then do a maintenance dose, it's like night and day. It's like when you have an elderly person have a urinary tract infection and they get, they act crazy. And then, because that's one of the first things they check is when you have an elderly person, especially a lot of the elderly do not drink enough fluid, they don't drink enough water, they're too sore to get up and go to the bathroom because of their arthritis, or they're they're in a situation where they can't move. And so that's one of the first things. Once all of a sudden an elderly person just acts out of their mind, it's often a UTI. And it's the same thing with the vitamin D thing. So oftentimes if they, like a light switch with dementia, normal forgetfulness and stuff and aging, we understand. But if it's a light switch, and if you're taking care of your elderly parents like I am, it's the vitamin D and the UTI are the two big things that you want to get checked out. Yeah.
I have two quick vitamin D questions.
Sure,
Also,
shoot.
If you are diagnosed with low vitamin D and then you take the supplement and, your test goes back there in the normal range, do most people need to then continue taking vitamin D?
Not the mega dose, but a maintenance level would be fine.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And is there possibly a genetic predisposition for low vitamin D?
There could be. Yeah. In fact, with this whole genomics with the whole genome, we're finding out all kinds of genetic connections. It's really, really exciting. So the answer to your question, yes, there can be a possibility, and stay tuned.
I have low vitamin D, and then I took the supplement, and it was fine. But I have two 20-somethings, and they both, at their last physical, tested low vitamin D.
Yeah. So
So,
case in point. Yeah, very good. Somebody else had their hand up in the back.
I was just going to add that.
Please.
I know I was low vitamin D level, and I think you have to pay attention to how much you're getting for a supplement. Because generally, it's best to start up with 1,000 milligram. That's kind of, like you said, a lower level one. And just be careful you don't go. I mean, you can go and look at these ones where they're like 2, 3, 4,000. And, I think. And also, I was in genetics when I was at Children's Hospital, and I know there was a genetic counselor that did a presentation. I don't remember anymore specifically what the genetic condition was, but there was something that was linked to this genetic condition, this vitamin D deficiency. Because I remember she said at the end of the talk, like, we all have to make sure our doctors are checking our vitamin D and blood work, and then probably many of us are deficient, and that we may need like a low-level supplement.
Right, to keep a maintenance.
75%.
What, 75% what?
Low vitamin D.
Oh,
I forget what the age.
Yeah.
Of the population?
Yeah.
Right.
And actually, in this city, there are lots of people who can need it in the winter and don't need it in the summer.
And I refer to that, because Cincinnati is cloudy. We don't go out a lot. And plus, we think vitamin D is in all these dairy products. And some folks, as they get older, they prefer not to drink or eat dairy, or they develop either a lactose intolerance or even a dairy allergy. And so they don't do it. So, but my point is, chances are we probably could all use a little shot in the arm of vitamin D. Just don't overdo it. And I remember what you're talking about, because I did a rotation. I got my dietetics degree at UC, and we did a rotation at Children's. So we went to CCDD, Cincinnati Center for Developmental Disorders. Was it like thalassemia or something like that? It was one of those conditions that was a vitamin D deficiency. And I remember that. I could kind of remember it in the book, but
I can't remember when she was presenting. I mean, it's been now several years ago.
But it's so exciting that this whole genome thing in our gut and with our and the nutrition relationship to it. Stay tuned. It's really, really, really cool. Anybody else? Yeah.
Lots of these foods, is there an overall comment on gluten?
Gluten is like the big new thing now. And as a dietitian, what I tell people is that there's a whole spectrum of gluten sensitivity. And if you truly are gluten allergic, then you have celiac disease. It's a matter of life or death, because it irritates your colon. Your colon chunks of it start falling off. It's horrible. It's horrible, a person has celiac. Then we started having a spectrum or a whole range of sensitivities. And some people find that they feel better, less cloudy, less sinusy, when they cut back on gluten. But most of them find that there's a threshold, that they can have a little bit and not go whole hog. I find that majority of my clients that think that they're gluten sensitive, once they cut back on gluten foods, they're actually cutting back on junky stuff, and they feel so much better. lots of bready stuff, lots of junky stuff, lots of stuff made with wheat flour, rye flour, or barley flour, because that's the three types of grains that contain gluten. So, and you know, I used to be so irritated and say, you're not gluten intolerant. Now it's like, who am I to say? If they feel better and they know their threshold, they're allowed to have like 2 sandwiches a week. But if they have more than that, they start feeling cloudy and feeling yucky. Who am I to say that that doesn't help them? So I'm a whole lot more whatever, but I'm always, you know, when people say that I'm gluten intolerant, it's like, well, you know, are you gluten allergic? Do you have a intolerance? Do you have a threshold? Do you feel better just when you avoid all those carb foods? What's the scoop? So stay tuned with that too. Good question. But we're out of time. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure. Take care. Thank you.